Welcome to Ohio VolleyTalk. Alongside me, here's in Austin. I'm Elliot Scully. Joining us today, the first-year head coach of the Upper Arlington Golden Bears, Phil Nagy. How you doing, Phil?
I'm doing great, gentlemen. Appreciate you having me on tonight.
Yeah, we're happy to have you on. So I guess the first thing that makes sense to start with, what led you to take the head coaching job at UA?
Um, well, I coached at Hilliard Bradley maybe 6 or 7 years ago on the girls' side, which was my first kind of coaching experience, and really enjoyed a lot of parts about it. And it just didn't return for a second year, so it was always something that I kind of wanted to do, which was sort of give it another shot. And so, my high school coach, actually Chris Van Arsdale, had been at Upper Arlington for several years, both on the girls and on the boys side, and actually had an opening in their middle school staff on the girls side. So that was what kind of got me into the district. That was 4 years ago, 5 years ago. And so I've been doing middle school with the girls and then like some JV stuff with the boys for a couple of the years. There was a COVID year thrown in there, which made everything kind of wacky. Um, and then he retired after a very long and illustrious career this past spring. And so just felt like it was the right thing to do. Had good relationship with a lot of the kids and families, and knew it was a place that I wanted to be. So I threw my name in the ring, so they say, and I'm sitting here talking to you about it a couple of months later. So
Yeah.
it worked out.
Absolutely. Now, you talked about your background in coaching girls volleyball and then also JV. How has that aided you in this job overall, especially with this being your first year with Upper Arlington at this level?
It's been good. I mean, I think anytime that you get a chance to experience working with kids, it just helps you get better because there's no two players are the same, no two kids need motivated the same way. Um, you know, on the surface, it's just six skills, right? It's not that hard of a game. So how hard can it be? And it's like, but everybody, learns at a different pace and learns in a different style, and even a team as a group. I've had groups that needed to be motivated really hard, and I've had groups that needed me to just kind of stay out of the way. Like, we got this, coach. Like, you don't need to get us fired up. And kind of just learning that mix from year to year has been, I mean, whatever level it is, I think it's great experience, and so it's given me a lot of experiences and tools that I've been able to pull from this year, sort of in the big seat, if you will, when the decisions somehow seem to matter a little bit more than eighth grade girls volleyball. Nothing against eighth grade girls volleyball; it's important. But so it's been good, and the experiences have been invaluable, and very few times this year have felt overwhelmed because of it. So.
That's great. Now, you talk about just the different things on being a coach, and I think there's a lot of places where you could find help per se. For example, whether that be from the AD, the athletic director, the association. Where do you find those resources made available to you to help you in this situation?
Yeah, all over the place. First off, our AD is awesome. He has been so supportive of ourself, of our program, from of ourselves, my coaching staff, but myself, our program. Um, every time I see him, is there anything you need? What can I do for you? I've got a great coaching staff. They're experienced, which is awesome, and I've coached with my assistant before when we were doing JV together with Chris a couple years ago. So I knew her really well, and she's a fount of knowledge and knows the rule book front to back, back to front. So she's been great as well. But also, I think just in general, the boys volleyball coaching community is, I think everybody's really nice to each other. I mean, like when we're playing each other, it's competitive and stuff. But I've like everybody has been like, hey man, if you need anything, let me know. We've got a couple like online forums where we can ask questions like, hey, this might be a stupid question, but what do we do for this? And everybody's just been really helpful, which is awesome because I think we're all just kind of wanting to kind of promote and continue to see the sport get bigger and bigger. And so, yeah, when we're playing each other, we're going to be competitive. And I mean, Elliot, your coach and I talk fairly regularly. We're
Yeah.
we're competitive on the court, but he's like, hey, what are your thoughts on this? And I'm like, hey, what are your thoughts on this? And so it's been a really kind of unique experience for me because it's not just like raw, cutthroat, and we just all want to just beat each other really badly. And yeah, when we play, it is. And if we get a chance to play Thomas, which it could happen this postseason,
Good.
I'm not going to be super friendly with Brian, during the game. But it's just been really, really great, and everybody's been really helpful. And so it's that part of it's been awesome, because there's really no question that I haven't been able to find the answer to, just kind of with the community and in at least in the coaching ranks.
I know we talked about this with Jim Cornette. It wasn't really something that I had thought of, but when you're a first year head coach, you don't always get to schedule all the teams because you're not necessarily there at the beginning of the scheduling period. When you were scheduling, what was your experience? Did you know your team very well, or did you have the opportunity to schedule everyone you wanted to get scheduled?
I'm not sure when the typical hiring would take place, but I felt like I was a little behind. And so one of the first things that I did in the fall when I got the job officially was just start reaching out to people. And I was, had good advice to just kind of start with the teams we had played last year and kind of just be like, hey, we played last year. Do you want to play again? Um, and I knew some of the pieces, like I said, having coached a couple of the kids in JV and being a part of the program, I knew what kind of team I thought we would have, but it's always a little bit different to get there. So it wasn't like, hey, I really want to go and schedule XYZ team because we need that experience, which might be something that I do in the future. So this time it was about just trying to get it full, get myself to 22 matches. Are there things that I'll change for next year? Absolutely. We've had some crazy weeks of 4 and 5 games, it's just too many. So, yeah, I just kind of started with, here's everybody that we played last year, and I would say maybe 90% of them we played again this year. A couple of them we dropped and added some new teams. But there wasn't any real rhyme or reason to it for me other than just, hey, anybody, there was sort of an OCC group email kind of a thing. Anybody need a match? I'm looking for 2 more kind of a thing.
Now, when you look at your schedule this year, you've played a lot of top local teams such as Liberty, Kilbourne, Pick North, all with very top seeds going into this tournament. What do you like about those certain teams? And more importantly, what do they do well as a program that you want to emulate?
Yeah, I mean, you named 3 good ones and 4 of our 8 losses in one sentence. So, I respect the heck out of those programs first and foremost. Again, it starts with just they've been so helpful, and Mel's been in the business for a long time, and she's super helpful for everybody. Same with Marcy, and I've known Dave a little bit as well over the years too. So, one is they've just been there, just the longevity, right? The programs that they have, and just the expectations. Kind of when you walk into those gyms, you don't really have, I don't think those coaches have to say like, our goal is to be really good this year. You know what I mean? Like, it's just kind of expected, like, hey, you're in this gym. We have some expectations. In terms of the quality of their play, they have some of those 3 teams in particular have some of the finest individual players that I ever saw, at least on the other side of the courts that we played against. And I was kind of joking with my assistant coach, like when we play Liberty, like they just play a really beautiful brand of volleyball. It starts with their passing, and that it was so fun to watch them play Darby earlier this week, because that's if I had to wager a couple of dimes on it, I would say that those 2 might end up seeing each other here before things end again. But so it starts with their passing, and then Connor just runs the floor so beautifully, and he's got guys who can terminate from all 4 spots. So that's with them. And then again, Will, and I think he's got a younger brother, right? I think there are 2 Haslets on Kilbourne's team
Jake Haslett,
who both are solid. Will's again one of just the cleanest players I think I saw all year. And Ian, who can play in the middle and play on the right side as well. And then with Pick North, they've got, I think his name is Kyle. He's the 6'5", 6'6" lefty, and it's just always going to be a problem. So in addition to having great coaches, great expectations, they also, to no surprise of anyone, have great players. So those were good challenges for us, and helped our guys kind of see like there's the next step when you're ready to take it.
Yeah, so speaking of that Liberty Derby match, it took place at the OCC Challenge, which was just this Monday. What was your experience going to that event as a coach for the first time?
Yeah, I had a blast. Just kind of the whole thing. I appreciate Evan and the Derby guys for running that. I thought it was a great experience. It was loud, it was noisy, there was a ton of people there. So again, I think just kind of for the sport in general, it was a great continued advertisement, and I saw some pictures made it into the Dispatch and some things, which is just great. Again, for the sport in Central Ohio, it was fun for us to be able to just to play a team we hadn't seen and weren't going to have an opportunity to get on our schedule and Gehanna and just get a good little matchup. And I have not, just because I do other things during those times of year. I do not coach club, but my guess is that's kind of what a club experience feels like, just like noisy gym, back-to-back courts, balls flying in, and you just can't really hear anything, and it's just kind of eat, sleep, breathe volleyball. So I thought it was great, and again, that Liberty Derby match. I mean, that main gym was packed, and it was loud, and it was, I mean, it felt like, okay, here, this is the postseason. It's coming.
Yeah.
Now, when you look at your schedule and how you've done this year, very impressive record, 14-8 and a third place finish in the OCC Central. Have you
Thank you.
learned anything from this year that you plan on adjusting for next season?
Uh, I'm not sure how long the podcast is. We could talk about all the things I've learned and fill up several.
I can always cut it down. Go ahead.
Yeah, I've learned a bunch of stuff. I really have. I think probably the first thing, talking about the schedule just a little bit earlier, is just the kind of the pacing of how often we should be playing games versus practices, and just kind of it's such a compact season already. I mean, it's kind of like you can start games mid-March and we're done by May 1st. So I mean, it was really like 6 weeks of craziness. But so I would like to. I think that would kind of be the first thing I would adjust, is some of those schedule things. Maybe a couple of more try or quad matches, just to kind of get a little bit more bang for the buck in terms of playing. And then yeah, continuing to kind of expand, as you said, we stayed pretty much in Central Ohio, and that was just a result of these are the teams we played last year. So I mean, there's no secret that there is strength in the South in our state, and so if there would be an opportunity to go down there sometime and play some of those teams, and there's a chance that we'll see some of those teams in the postseason. Our region includes Centerville and Beaver Creek and Edgewood and Kettering and some of those schools, so not all the way quite to Cincinnati, but certainly that direction. And I know Beaver Creek's got a really strong program as well, so maybe we'll see it this year. If not, that might be something that I'd like to do. Just the management level of it. I mean, you think you've got it figured out, but it's the coaching part is so much like of the admin stuff and just the things that don't really have to do with being on the court and coaching volleyball. So just maybe having a little bit better plan for how to keep those kinds of things organized, and maybe delegate a few of those, more responsibilities to booster groups and just things like that. I just wanted to kind of be in charge of as many things as possible this year, because I wanted to figure out how they all worked. And I did, which was great. But now it's time to say, you know what, you can handle all the pregame meals. I don't need to be ordering Jimmy John's for 39 people every whip stitch, those kinds of things. So, but yeah, I've learned a bunch, and yeah, excited to do it again.
Now, let's take a quick look at the social media. Now, I've been looking at you guys from Twitter and Instagram, and there's so many posts overall, whether that be about the camaraderie of the team, players getting a certain points and showing off their skills in general. Can you just speak to that approach and what it speaks to the culture around this team?
Yeah, so that would be one of those things that I might delegate to someone else, because it is a lot of work. But I enjoy doing it. I love talking about our guys, and it really does start with them. I mean, we, our theme, our vision, our motto, whatever, this year has been BEARS, which is an acronym. I don't know if it's going to probably be backwards on the camera. We all have little bracelets. And the first one of those is belong. And so being a team, being the brotherhood, being the group of guys, has been the first and foremost thing that we've preached from the beginning. And so anything that I can do to promote that, whether it's just, hey, here's some guys celebrating celebrating a point, and they just got together and they talked about it, and it's like, hey, that's worth showing off. And so I've wanted to try to highlight that as much as I could. We have had some players with some really cool individual statistical things too, and even though they probably wouldn't have never asked for me to do that, I also felt it appropriate to say, hey, this kid's number 6 in the state in assists. I think that's pretty darn cool. And so let's talk about him, and let's talk about the fact that he didn't start setting until 6 months ago, and he was our libero for the last. I mean, like, so any time I can get to kind of shout out our guys um, and our program in general, and just to be out there, and at least at Upper Arlington at the school, just about all the other sports teams have very active social media pages too. So the bar was kind of set pretty pretty high, and I wouldn't claim to be like a super Instagram nerd or user or anything like that. So I've definitely learned some things like, Coach, you never say that. Don't say that. It's been fun, and the guys see it, but you know, people are following and liking them, and I think it's cool for their parents, and I think it's cool for them, and something that maybe 5 years down the line they can pull it back up and relive some of those glory days too.
Yeah, absolutely. Now a little bit of a less high note. You had an outside hitter, Cam Rowe. He's first team All OCC, but he's injured right now. Can you give us any insight to what that injury is like and the timeline, maybe?
Yeah, so it was a pretty big blow. A week ago, Thursday, we were playing our last OCC game at Orange, and it was just, I mean, you guys know that, the last 90 seconds or whatever, a warm up serving both sides, and just wrong place at the wrong time, and he landed right on a ball, and it was the scream of agony, and everyone's like, "Oh my gosh, what happened?" It was like 90 seconds before the match. It was like, "Okay, you go here, you go here, you go here," and they're shout out to their training staff. They took great care of him right away, but it was pretty clear he wasn't playing again that night, or the next night we were at Watterson, or Monday when we were with Gahanna. So we're still waiting for the doctors to kind of let us know. He's working super hard at his rehab. Um, I I wish I could tell you definitively if he's going to come back, but he's a player who, he's our best passer statistically. He's got our, the most kills on our team statistically, obviously, rated first team OCC by the other coaches in the conference. I mean, it's a hard piece to just be like, oh, cool, next man up, like we'll be good, and so, yeah, we moved our right side to outside, and then another kid to right, so it's a lot of shuffling of the deck. And so, yeah, we really hope he's back. I mean, if we want to make the kind of noise in the postseason that we want to, I mean, obviously you need your best player to be able to play at your best. So we certainly hope that he's back, but I can't break any news for you tonight here, guys. I don't have a good sense on it just yet.
Yeah, no worries. I mean, I hope he's okay and he can hopefully get back for some postseason matches. You've got Briggs coming up on May 10th, and then you've got potentially some teams beyond that. What's the goal of this team going into the postseason?
Yeah, I mean, it really is, cliche, and it's been one of our mottos. In addition to to the Bears is next ball, and that's truly just, we're going to try to focus on the very next one, and that's not even the next point, but it's just the very next ball, a contact at a time is kind of how we've tried to take this season, and I think it keeps you from getting too high, but also keeps you from getting too low emotionally, and just like, hey, the only one that matters is the next one. Like the next one that comes to me, my next serve, my next assist, my next swing, like whatever it is. And so we'll take it the same approach. We scrimmaged Briggs very, very early in the year. I like Herb's kids a lot. I love his program and what he's doing over there, and have a ton of respect for him. And he's got a couple of kids who can really play, and so we're going to need to, really focus on the next ball and just take it one at a time. And again, all the coach cliches, right? You throw the records out the window, throw the seeds out the window. Like when the whistle blows, when the whistle blows, I mean, it's a funny game, and it's the momentum can swing quickly. You guys know how that works, and a kid can roll his ankle right before the game. I mean, it's all kinds of crazy things that can happen. And so we're looking forward to the challenge. We're ready to kind of, to have this postseason begin. And, we understand what that means to kind of win or go home, and, excited about the ability to host, and we're going to try to pack the gym, and next Wednesday night, get it going, Bears versus Bears.
Yeah. Should be a good one. Well, Coach, thanks so much for coming on. You've been a great guest, very articulate, which is awesome. Always great to have from a guest. But yeah, good luck against Briggs, and hopefully beyond that too. Awesome.
Thank you, guys. Really appreciate your time.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, that was Phil Nagy there with Upper Arlington. Thanks again for him for coming on. So you can see back in Ohio, which is awesome. If you want to quiz yourself on state capitals while you're watching. You can do that for sure. So Dublin Jerome won the Battle of Dublin, swept Scioto and Kaufman. Congratulations to them. Again, you can win a trophy. It's pretty sweet. Big thing that happened, Elder upset undefeated St. Xavier. I mean, as a St. Xavier graduate yourself, why don't you give your commentary on this first and foremost?
Yeah, I think it was just a close game down the stretch. And I think it almost mirrored what happened last year, where Elder was coming in flying high, or at least a lot of people expected the Panthers to be doing so. And then there's a St. Xavier side that a lot of people wrote off earlier that year. And then, surprise, surprise, they were able to pull off a 5-set victory. And congrats to the Panthers. They were able to do it as well. It almost seems like, from what we've seen from Elder, they've just been on a great uptick throughout this entire year. And then on the other side for St. X, of course, this is not the first time we've seen the Bombers in a close 5-set matchup where they beat Darby in the Centerville Elite Tournament. Granted, Bentley Meyer did not play for most of that match. And then it was also the case on the road at Beaver Creek. So going into this one, there was a little bit of shakiness for the Bombers. There was not 100% confidence, and it showed there against a Panthers side that could have gotten a couple of sets off the Bombers at home. You may remember earlier this year, Elder was up about 14-4 in the first set before the Bombers came storming back to take set one. So I think there was a lot of shakiness from the Bombers, and I think more importantly, I know for myself, broadcasting at Elder's volleyball gym, it's, I think, one of the most raucous and, in my opinion, in terms of atmosphere and environment, one of the best places to play. If you're the Panthers, not necessarily the case if you're the visiting side.
Yeah, I think that says a tremendous amount about what Elder's done this season to be able to come back and knock off the number 1 team in the state undefeated. They got Bradley Lanter back. I think him and Fred Harvey are doing great there on the outside. And then Tommy Tierney is really coming into his own on the right side. And then they had Dylan Samuels, who's a fantastic libero. So they were always a scrappy team. I think they're starting to get an offense and being able to say, hey, we can put the ball down too. So congratulations to them. It's a great win. Honestly, though, I don't think it puts me off St. X that much, because if you look at set 3 and set 4, St. X won 25-11 and 25-12, right? I mean, they lost set 1, 2, and 5, but I don't know. I would say it was the number 1 team in the state that had an off day. And the set 3 and set 4, I think, demonstrates to me that they still are the number 1 team. And just because they took that loss doesn't necessarily mean they come off that top spot. So St. X went on to sweep Walnut Hills and Sycamore Distillery tonight. So they'll finish the season 19-1, still a fantastic record. And then Elder swept Loveland. So, I think after seed 4, which is Elder, and region 4, it's really kind of a toss-up as to who's going to come out and give these guys, the top dogs, a challenge. St. Vincent St. Mary beat Hoban in 4, which is probably going to be the regional final matchup in region 6. They also beat Ignatius in 5, which I was not expecting. Ignatius will fall to 13-9 on the season. And, they were given the 2 seed in region 2. I don't know. There was some controversy over that. I know they were battling injury all year. Obviously, that was something we talked about. I don't know. I don't know how much that goes into the losses. I'm sure. I mean, it must have been a huge part of the coach's mindset, but they've had several. I think they lost to Brecksville, Jackson, St. Ed's, and St. Vincent St. Mary, all regional opponents, just in these past couple weeks.
And then to note about that is the idea that all of those 3 teams that are not including St. Vincent St. Mary's, they have lower seeds than St. Ignatius. So I think it almost goes to the fact, of course, you and I did not have Ignatius at number 2, and it was rather generous, at least from our opinions, of what ended up going down that day when the seedings were decided. But nonetheless, I think my question is, does Ignatius live up to the billing? Because again, we've talked about the injuries this entire season, and maybe if they can get a full healthy squad, maybe we can't see the Ignatius that we saw last year. But from what we've seen so far, I think a lot of us are scratching our heads as to why Ignatius is a 2nd seed. And I think, can they deliver in that spot?
Yeah, at the end of the day, it really is just a number. You still got to beat the teams. St. Charles had a great week. They upset Bishop Fenwick in 5, and they swept St. Edward. So, for a team that, personally, I probably had written off coming into the season as not really good. I mean, I think they've got a great chance to make some noise there in Region 5. Probably a good shot to make a regional final against DeSales. So the OCC Challenge, which is a best-of-3 event. One notable thing we saw was Jerome swept Pick North. Now, Pick North had gone into that match 19-2, and they picked up the 2 seed in Region 1. Jerome, obviously, in Region 3. This kind of confirms some suspicion I had where Pick North really didn't play a super competitive schedule. They knocked off some of the guys in the OC Cardinal. But really, if you look at their league schedule, which they can't control to their credit, but kind of had like 11 free wins in there. Obviously, the wins against New Albany were good. But besides that, I don't think they played a super competitive schedule. I thought they were overseeded at the 2 spot. So we'll see what happens when we get into the tournament. But that kind of confirmed my suspicions that maybe they were a little bit too high. And then the big one, Darby, who hosts it, who was previously number 5, and Liberty was previously number 3. Darby upset Liberty in 3. So yeah, just a really big win there. I think when you look at that Darby team, the beginning of the season, right? Everyone knows, hey, they got a good setter, good libero, good outside, good MH1. That was kind of a surprise, but yeah, like those are the guys, right? And then everyone else is kind of middle of the pack. But I think they've done a very good job of developing it so everyone on the court is a weapon. Everyone can put a ball down. And that's just really stark comparison from what I've seen in March to what I see now. I think they're peaking at the right time.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you there. And I think the biggest question we had going into that, and you said it as well, that it's going to be back and forth and there's going to be a lot of close sets. And there were overall down the stretch. And it almost shows, to my ideal, the idea that Darby can be competitive too on their home court against Olentangy Liberty. And it almost proves what you said earlier, the fact that depth really helps this team out. We saw Liberty do this, especially in that regional and then going into the state tournament against Moeller, where they gave the Crusaders a run for their money in that game and sent them to 5. And then we've seen Darby do the same this year too in the region. I'd really love to see if these two face off in a state semifinal, because it's becoming very close. And a lot of people are predicting that these two could be facing off again. Would be really interesting to see a rematch.
LaSalle beat Loveland in 5. So again, that idea that just after the 4 seed with Elder, it's really a toss up as to who's the best there in Region 4. So that'll be a great battle. The Sales returned their setter Cameron Hoying. They had 2 great wins. They beat New Albany in 4, and then they just destroyed Mount Vernon in 3. I mean, just a great win for them. They're obviously, I think you put them back at number 1. They're the clear favorite to win in D2. Now, I don't know. I wasn't aware of any issues with Mount Vernon missing people, so it was a little bit surprising for me that they lost so badly.
There is a little concern, especially knowing that there's a possibility you'd face a team like Olentangy Berlin in a regional semifinal, and the fact that, yes, you did beat the Bears in 5 earlier this year on your home court, but things are different. The teams are different, at least how they're doing. And more importantly, the venue is going to be different for that regional semifinal. So I think down the stretch, there's a lot of questions for Mount Vernon. I don't think the alarm's going off just yet, though. I think they can try to right the ship going into the playoffs. And if they have some convincing wins earlier on, that will help them down the stretch once those games really start to mean something.
Hudson swept Jackson and St. Ed, so they finished the season, their regular season, 20-0. Congratulations to them. It's obviously an incredible accomplishment to go undefeated in the regular season. Almost nobody does it. Hudson's best wins were against Berlin and Mount Vernon, who are great teams, but not quite in that top 5 range right now. There's kind of a question mark, right? There's a good possibility that we'll see a Hudson St. X semifinal, and if they don't play St. X, they're playing someone who knocked off St. X. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. I don't know. It's just I can't put them at number 1 right now. Edgewood is they're the SWAC champs this year, so congratulations to them. They swept Mount Healthy. That was another conference I didn't necessarily know existed. So if you look on their max preps, the only conference match they had as designated as a conference match was that one over Mount Healthy. So I have no clue who's in the SWAC, but congratulations to them. Saw it on social media. They won their league. Jackson swept Stowe 3-0. So that's another big one for regional seedings. I think that, another big one for regional analysis, I guess seedings are done. I believe that was the rematch of the finals of the Polar Bear Bash, which is the tournament that Jackson hosts every year. But I think that Jackson, honestly, if I was seeding, I think Jackson deserved the 2 seed. And I think they're proving it with their wins and just how they've been playing recently. They're going into the playoffs on fire. And they've got a good chance, I think, to knock off St. Ignatius should they get there.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you over there. I also had Jackson at number 2, and I think, like you said, the wins have backed it up and proven that this team can really go the distance. And despite them being a number 5 seed and despite playing Stowe again on Wednesday, I think there's a lot of confidence in the side that they can go on the road, especially in these earlier rounds, and get the victories. Because, in my opinion, that's, I think, the difference on if Jackson's going to be out, or this could be a team that goes all the way to the Elite Eight and is facing Hudson for the regional final.
And then finally, Berlin swept Big Walnut. Wasn't really surprising there. I think they were 0-13 in conference play going into that one, but they secured a share of the OCC Cardinal. So that's a three-way tie, tied with Darby and Jerome. All teams went 12-2, and interestingly enough, they all split with each other. So the only losses of the 3 champions were to the other champions. So that's pretty cool. Congratulations to them. Looking at our D1 rankings here, not a whole lot has changed. Obviously, I think the big one was Hilliard Darby moved up from 5 into the 3 spot and then pushed Liberty and Muller down 1. And then Elder moves back up into the top 10.
First top 6, pretty simple down the stretch.
Mm-hmm.
The biggest difference is I put Dublin Jerome at number 10, and it goes back to the idea of the OCC Cardinal. Granted, Beaver Creek is going to be number 1 in their respective region at Region 3, but I think from what we've seen overall from Dublin Jerome, it's been very convincing down the stretch, especially in an OCC Cardinal that's tough overall. And I think it almost shows how they've played this season, where some of their losses, and they haven't had too many of them, have come to competitive sides. And compared to Beaver Creek, who picks up some losses that we're often scratching our heads at, I think that's where the Celtics almost have a step up on the Beavers over there.
Yeah, it's a great point. I think I would imagine that you have Beaver Creek at 11. I think I have Jerome at 11. So, it's really just a toss-up of take your pick there. I think them securing the 1 seed in the region probably did it for me. And I don't know. I think they had probably a bad day at a Mount Vernon quad, but outside of that, nothing really too concerning. I think their biggest thing is they are the only team to beat Darby that did not go to 5. So they went 4 and beat Darby that way. Everyone else that Darby's lost to was St. X in 5, Moeller in 5, Jerome in 5, and Berlin in 5. So I don't know. I would say that Beaver Creek just deserves a 10 spot, but again, it's just personal preference. Looking at D2 rankings, I think the big change was that you moved St. Vincent St. Mary down to 2 and brought the sales back up to 1.
Simply put, I saw what they did against Mount Vernon, and also it was quite convincing. You can take a team in the Division 1 top 10, mind you, and beat them the way they did. That's something for me, especially for St. Francis de Sales, that not only puts them back at number 1, but you're almost entering the territory to some extent where we saw Baden last year, where that Rams team, I think had they been in Division 1, they could have had a shot to win it all.
The other big jump there, St. Charles coming up from 8 to 6. And then I had Fenwick dropping down to 4 just because they were upset by St. Charles. I don't think it's enough to pull Fenwick down below St. Charles. I think Fenwick still had the better season overall, and St. Charles has had probably some worse losses. But really impressed with how St. Charles has come back and really made it a season. And I think they've got a lot of momentum pending in the playoffs. Fenwick kind of taking a rough loss at a bad time. But that's the only other difference there. Our rankings at this point in the season, I think we know what we've seen from these teams, and it's really pretty similar. If you are interested at all in doing a bracket competition for the playoffs, I know someone on Yappy Forums made it, so I'll link it in the description for both Division 1 and Division 2. It's basically exactly how March Madness works. If you've ever filled out a bracket there, you just pick who you think is going to win the state championship, pick every game, and whoever picks most games right with the significance wins. So, yeah, definitely a fun competition. We're both in it, so feel free to compete alongside us. All right, so now we're going to get into our bracket picks for the playoffs. So we'll start off here in Division 1 with Region 1. If you look at Olentangy Liberty, I think they got probably the truest 1 seed of the tournament, at least in Division 1. They basically have to play New Albany to get into a regional final. That's basically it. That's about as good as you can ask for. So I would say I think I have Olentangy Orange coming out over Whetstone and then losing to Olentangy Liberty. And Olentangy Liberty will have advanced to the May 13th match. Pick Central would pull the upset over Westerville South, and we'll see Pick Central head into play Olentangy Liberty in the regional quarterfinals. Licking Heights will knock out Westerville Central and play New Albany, and then New Albany will take out Licking Heights, and they will move on. That one should be interesting, though. Licking Heights has been playing. I know a good point of reference is Mount Vernon. I think the first time the Battle of the Bees happened, Mount Vernon 1-4, and this past time Licking Heights lost the first set 25-27 and then got swept. But I do think, though, New Albany will move on. Western North has had a great season, and I think the reason Olentangy has been at 9 was because they've been missing their big outside Gavin Grover for most of the season due to an ankle injury. They really could have beaten a lot of teams if they had him back. I believe I have confirmation that he will be back for that match. So I actually have Olentangy pulling the upset and playing New Albany in that regional quarterfinal.
Olentangy, although they haven't gotten the attention that they might have wanted, I think they'll definitely get the victory there.
On the other side of the bracket, we've got Pick North seated at 2, and they will play the winner of Delaware Hayes and Reynoldsburg. I think I've got Hayes coming out of that one. They've looked solid. I haven't seen a whole lot of Reynoldsburg, but I know Hayes has a couple good outsides. And then I think Pick North will take the match over Hayes with relative ease. And then Berlin shouldn't have any issues taking care of Newark. Mount Vernon, again, shouldn't have any issues with Northland. Gahanna Lincoln shouldn't have any issues with Big Walnut. Should be all chalk from there.
Especially towards that bottom part of the bracket where we're seeing a lot of the favorites be immense favorites in that regards. It's going to make those regional quarterfinals quite interesting to see because both teams could have an opportunity to rest some of their star players in the earlier rounds and makes those regional quarterfinals even more interesting, knowing that a lot of those teams will be at 100%.
Yeah, I mean, and I think another interesting thing to take away from this, you look at the dominance of Liberty this season. The 2 seed, 3 seed, and 4 seed, Pick North, Mount Vernon, and Berlin all went away from Liberty. So that just makes their job that much easier. And New Albany, though they're a great team, I think really won't be an issue for the Patriots to come away with a win there. And in Region 2 for Division 1, first matchup, we've got Hudson playing the winner of Euclid and Shaker Heights. Honestly, I have not been able to follow either of those teams this season, so I'll just go off the seeding and say Euclid comes away with the win there, and then Hudson should have no trouble advancing to the regional quarterfinal. Between Brunswick and Cleveland Heights, I believe Brunswick should come away with a win there. Yeah, I think they've had some much more key wins compared to Cleveland Heights, so it should be a Hudson versus Brunswick quarterfinal on May 13th. Then we got St. Ed's playing new winner of Medina and Akron North. I think Medina will take this, and then St. Edward will advance to the regional quarterfinal. And then we got an interesting one, Nordonia and Walsh Jesuit. Now, it's interesting. I think Nordonia's had the better record. I don't know. I would say, actually, I would like to see – I think Nordonia will take this one. It's interesting they're playing on May 9th. I didn't think that was supposed to happen, so I wonder if that's a rescheduling. But I'd imagine Nordonia moves on and plays St. Edward's in a quarterfinal.
This one, I'm actually going to disagree with you. Ooh. I think, well, I say Nordonia is going to beat Walsh Jesuit, but I actually think Medina beats St. Edward's this year. We haven't seen St. Ed's be at their strongest this year, and I think more importantly, in those competitive matchups, we've actually seen them lose. And Medina on the other side has had a pretty solid year this year. I actually think they'll be on to the regional quarterfinals and they'll face Nordonia.
That would be a heck of an upset. On the other side of the bracket, we've got St. Ignatius seated at 2. It'll play the winner of Springfield and Mentor. Again, 2 more teams I haven't really been able to follow, have not really been relevant in the state rankings decisions. So I'll go off the seedings here. Say Springfield at home will take the win over Mentor, and Ignatius will take the win there and move on to the regional quarterfinal. Playing them, Firestone shouldn't have any issues taking care of Amherst Steel. So we'll see an Ignatius Firestone quarterfinal.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you over there. And there's going to be a lot of bad blood between Firestone and St. Ignatius, knowing that they faced off in a regional final last year at Walsh Jesuit, and especially knowing the competition between those two, especially what they will see on Wednesday, it's going to make that matchup even more better.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd say bad blood. I don't think either teams or coaches strike me as bad blood type of people, but definitely a rivalry going there. And then Stowe Monroe Falls and Massillon Jackson, maybe the best matchup in the first round on May 10th. That'll be just a really interesting one. I think that Jackson really was underseeded. I think 5 was too low. I think they should have been at 2. They just convincingly won earlier tonight against Stowe Monroe Falls, swept them, and really didn't struggle. So I think Jackson moves on just based off of that. And I think Brecksville Broadview Heights will be able to defeat John Marshall at home and will be able to advance to play Jackson.
Jackson has a good chance of beating Brecksville Broadview next Saturday in a regional quarterfinal. So that game is going to decide a lot, especially on that bottom part of the bracket, in terms of who ends up making those big rounds, who tests Ignatius, and who tests Hudson in the end.
Kind of a gauntlet down there in the lower half. St. Ed's really the only team to go after Hudson, willing to take their chances against the undefeated Explorers. But yeah, Brecksville, Broadview Heights, Jackson, Stowe, Firestone, Ignatius, all teams that have a possibility to come out of that side and play Hudson or St. Ed's in a regional final. Now looking at Region 3, and I just want to take a second, right, before we do any predictions. Beaver Creek was given the 1 seed, but if you look at the bracket, Beaver Creek, to get to a regional final, will likely have to take care of Kilbourne and will likely have to take care of Dublin Jerome. Darby, on the other hand, they'll have to win against maybe Thomas Worthington. I think that's probably it. Thomas Worthington or Upper Arlington. So I don't know. I just think we talked about, I think Beaver Creek had the resume to get the 1 seed, but who do the coaches respect as the 1 seed, right? Because again, it is just a number. Who got the more favorable path? It was Darby by a million years. But looking at that first matchup, Beaver Creek against Clay Northmont should be an easy win for Beaver Creek to advance. And then same thing, Kilbourne shouldn't have any issues with Scioto. Scioto 2-12 in OCC Cardinal play this year. Kilbourne obviously beating them twice, so shouldn't be any issues there. Edgewood Kaufman will be an interesting one. I think that Edgewood could edge them out and advance to the next round at home and just won the SWAC. So should be a good matchup, but I think Edgewood will come out of that one. And then Dublin Jerome will pretty easily advance over Centerville. Just hasn't really been their year this year. I'm sure they'll bounce back.
Yeah, I agree with you. Celtics are on to the next round. I'd have to agree with you with Edgewood, but I think another thing that other people may not understand is just the drive Dublin Kaufman will be making that day to go to Edgewood. Just to preface, Edgewood is almost close to the kind of on the outskirts of the greater Cincinnati area, close to Middletown and Hamilton, kind of between those two. So Dublin Kaufman's making about an hour and a half, hour 45 drive just to play that game. And it gives Edgewood some sort of an advantage in, I think, what would be a hotly contested and a tight playoff matchup. The biggest question for me is Edgewood has not had that competitive of a schedule. If I'm not mistaken, I think their biggest competition this year has been against Sycamore, and they ended up losing that at home. But I think they'll live up to the billing and they'll rise to the occasion to win that one on Wednesday.
Yeah, it's an interesting point you make. Region 3 is probably the region that makes the least sense geographically. I mean, throwing in West Region teams with half of the Central Region teams, former West Region. But if you think about it, like regional semifinals and regional finals will be held at Centerville. Let's say it's Darby versus Beaver Creek in a regional final. Is it really a neutral site if it's Beaver Creek driving to Centerville versus Darby driving like an hour, 20 minutes plus to Centerville? Like, I don't know. I understand that we have to make regions, have to put people someplace, but I don't know if that really qualifies as a neutral site at that point. Darby will advance past Bradley. Bradley's had kind of a rough season this year, and Darby's obviously on fire. And then Middletown, Kettering, Fairmont. I'm going to say I think Middletown advances here. Should be a good matchup, but I think Middletown with the advantage at home should move past them.
This one is another one I disagree with you. Fairmont.
Really?
Yeah, I think Fairmont's just had a more solid year, and Middletown on the other side, yes, they have the home court advantage, but again, in GMC, they haven't looked that solid overall. I should also bring up that those two played off earlier this year. Middletown won that in 5, but 2 of the 3 sets they won by 2 points. So it was a hotly contested match that day in Middletown. And I think Fairmont will get revenge.
I think we will see Upper Arlington take care of Briggs. We just talked to Phil Nagy, their head coach, earlier on. I think that he'll be able to rally his guys, especially if they can get Cam back, their big outside hitter. And then we've got Thomas Worthington playing the winner of Wayne and Davidson. I think Davidson will come away with the win against Wayne. And I think Thomas Worthington will beat Davidson, and then we'll see an Upper Arlington Thomas Worthington quarterfinal.
Yeah, I would agree with you there. Davidson's looks solid, and Thomas Worthington as well. Again, not as solid as how we saw them last year, but I think they'll be back, and then that should set up an interesting matchup though against Upper Arlington. That's a match that could go either way should it happen.
Region 4, formerly the South, we got St. X playing Lebanon. Obviously, St. X should come away with a win there. and then LaSalle should beat Princeton to give us a pretty interesting regional quarterfinal match.
This is going to be one of the few moments, might be the first time in history that you could be seeing LaSalle and St. X, the two schools on North Bend Road, facing off in a playoff. Of course, LaSalle making the jump from D2 to D1 this year. So that would be a really interesting one down the stretch, knowing that those guys have gone to extra sets earlier this year when they played at LaSalle. But I think the Bombers will take care of business in this opening week.
Elder should beat Oak Hills, and then Walnut Hills should beat Mason.
Elder, should they beat Oak Hills, keeps that advantage, and I talked about it earlier. Their volleyball and wrestling gymnasium, in my opinion, is one of the craziest places to watch a game, one of the craziest places to broadcast. And I think, yes, Elder's gotten better, but there's a chance that the Eagles, although they haven't been in the spotlight as much this year, could be pulling upsets. So that could be a very interesting regional quarterfinal as well. And that too, the winner of that plays St. X.
We talked about you had to have your record submitted, I think, by Thursday, right? Or early Friday morning. So the only matches up till Thursday counted. So the Elders win over St. X actually wasn't taken into account for seedings, but tournament draw was after that win. So I love Sean Tierney's decision to go after St. X on their side of the bracket. And they have that confidence like, hey, we can beat St. X. We know we beat St. X. So why not try to do it at their place? And then on the other side, we've got Moeller should beat Hamilton. And then Lakota West, I would say, will probably get the win over Milford and move on to a regional quarterfinal. Moeller honestly might have one of the easier paths here. Lakota West, certainly not a bad opponent. I would rather play them than Walnut Hills or LaSalle. And then we have Sycamore playing the winner of Fairfield and West Claremont. Honestly, Fairfield has not had a terrible season this year. Definitely improved from last year. So I think I'll have them advancing. And then Sycamore shouldn't have any issues taking care of Fairfield. And then it'll be Loveland against Lakota East. I've got Lakota East winning here. They've had a pretty great season, and Loveland's recently taken some tough losses. So I think Lakota East and Sycamore will advance to the regional quarterfinal.
Yeah, I'd agree with you there on the Thunderhawks, and I might actually be at that game on Wednesday. There's a lot of interesting ones in and around where I'm at in the Cincinnati area. But again, West Claremont and Fairfield could be an interesting one on Monday. Again, both of these teams have faced some interesting competition, both in D1 and D2. I know Fairfield had a scrimmage against Baden to start off the year, and West Claremont ended up hosting McNick and Lakota East earlier. From what it just seems like, from what we've seen from West Claremont, at least from what I've seen in terms of their results, I'd actually have them pulling upset against Fairfield. Again, I have a lot more upsets than you do in this first round, and I think that's one of them. I think West Claremont will be facing Sycamore on Wednesday.
So that'll do it for Division 1. Now, looking at Division 2, Region 5, it actually – playoffs don't really start till May 13th. The first playoff match we'll see will be Chillicothe versus Patriot Preparatory on May 10th. So I would say Chillicothe comes away with the win there. Finally figured out what region they're supposed to go to. Actually put in 2 regions on the original document. But yeah, I think Chillicothe will come away with the winner. They're 4-seeded for a reason. Now I know it was interesting. I think Andy Feltz in an article by the Dispatch, he said it would be cool to see an all CCL semifinals, excuse me. And that is really realistic here. You see St. Charles and Watterson have a good chance to advance, and Hartley and DeSales up at the top here have a good chance to advance as well. So we could see that. That would be cool for that league. There's one more on May 10th in Region 7, and that'll be Perry versus Independence. 2 more teams, honestly, I haven't really been able to follow. They've not really been relevant in the D2 state rankings. I would guess to give it to Independence. They're hosting it. They've got the higher seed, so I'll give it to them.
Again, we've talked about this Region 7 before, and some people may be qualifying it as a free win for whoever ends up making it out of the region that includes DeSales and St. Charles once we get to a semifinal. But I really want to see how some of these other teams challenge each other. Again, Villa Angela St. Joseph seems to be quite a favor to be the first seed, and they might be the Region 7 champs in my opinion. But you're having a lot of teams like Bard Early College had a solid year, not too many losses for them. Chardon as well, and that too, this is a team that is in their first year of existence, and yet they're able to get some quality wins when it matters the most. And then on the other side of the bracket, Notre Dame Cathedral Latin, again, another new squad in terms of OHSA. And you also look at some others. Berkshire has been solid as well. Could be interesting to see a Chardon versus Berkshire regional semi, should it happen.
And the final one in Region 8, I'll get quite a few May 10th matches here. I think Baden should come away with a win over Marshall. Alter, though they haven't had a lot of wins, they've had a lot of competitive losses. So I think that Alter will come away with a win over Middletown Christian. And then Carroll shouldn't have any issues coming away with a win over East Dayton Christian.
That top part of the bracket is just so stacked. I mean, if you've been tuning in throughout this entire season, you know how I like to almost group the favorites, in my opinion, when it comes to this region, down to Fenwick, Carroll, and Baden, who all happen to be in that top half. And again, it just seems like there's going to be a gauntlet on that side. And it seems like whoever makes it out of that has a good chance against whoever makes it out of the bottom half, just from the way they've been tested earlier on in that stretch. Again, you could have a Baden versus Fenwick regional quarterfinal. They've played some really interesting matches earlier this year, both at Baden and Fenwick. So it would be interesting to decide who wins that rubber match. The same could be said if one of those teams faces Carroll. So again, a chance to get some bragging rights on the year, and more importantly, strengthen your resume as you get into the latter stages of this.
Chaminade Julian playing Meadowdale. I think Chaminade Julian will come away with a win there. Again, a team that probably hasn't had a lot of competitive wins, but played a lot of competitive teams and played them reasonably close. So I think CJ will come away with a win there, especially at home. And then on the bottom, McNicholas at the 5 seed over Mount Healthy at the 12. I think McNicholas has had some wins, 2 great wins over Baden. So I think we'll see them advance to play Taylor.
I think McNick Taylor could be a really interesting regional quarterfinal on the other side. 2 teams that are almost hiding in the shadows, but I think more importantly for Taylor, that's a squad that can really make history if they can get a win on May 13th.
Yeah, I mean, they've had a great season. I mean, they went from really kind of being a nobody team last year. Coach done a great job building a program. This year they're 16-6. And won the Purple Rain tournament. So yeah, really awesome. Well, we did recently have the regional all-stars released. So the state player of the year will be one of those 4 guys from each of the regions. So the regional player of the year in region 1 was Caden Whiteside from Old Tangent Liberty. In region 2, it was Noah Zappone from Hudson. Region 3, it was Colin Brown from Beaver Creek. And in region 4, it was Bentley Meyer from St. X. Now of that group, I think I would say either Caden Whiteside or Noah Zappone. It could go either way. Just both are great players. Zappone might get the edge because he's a senior, but man, if you've ever seen like Caden Whiteside run an in-system BIC with Liberty, it's pretty spectacular. Now, the one thing I think a lot of people had Owen Walsh maybe as getting player of the year. Obviously, he can't really get that anymore now that he's not a regional player of the year. Just traditionally, the 4 player of the years have been the first 4 teams on the first team all-state list. So I don't know. I think if you look at Owen Walsh's stats, he beat Meyer in every single stat category and almost 100 kills more. So that is an argument there. But I also think if you look at the way Sycamore and St. X played each other tonight, I think Meyer outplayed Walsh. And I don't know. I know there is some speculation that maybe it was just like, hey, he's just on the best team, so let's pick the OH1. But I really do think skill-wise, Meyer was a really great player, and I think deserved the player of the year in that region.
There's a lot of great guys in that team, including Brady Jones and Reed Terrell, who can get the work done. But the way Meyer has stepped up and almost became versatile in that category, especially in the course of an offseason, is really special for him. And in my opinion, again, Owen Walsh, again, kind of the one key star player. Again, Trajan Crest did a great job last year for Sycamore, and Walsh was able to come back and really improve this team. It's a tough pick. It really is a tough pick, but I think when it comes to the idea of a more complete team, and we saw this today again when these 2 played off, when it comes to a complete team, when it comes to a complete player, I think Meyer takes that.
Yeah, I don't even think Sycamore's coaches would disagree with me that St. X is obviously the deeper team, right? They have more options to get the ball to, whereas Sycamore is a little bit more feed Walsh to get the win. Not that that's a bad thing, but I think, gets him a few more kills. And I think their league schedule, which obviously, again, they can't control. I think they do a great job playing competitively outside of their league. there's definitely some not so great teams in their league schedule that can tend to rack up the stats. So yeah, I just think that with how X played and with how many great players are on X, I think Bentley Meyer did deserve the player of the year in that region. Now, if you look at Division 2, in Region 5, we had Cameron Hoying from DeSales, Regional Player of the Year. Region 6, Bobby Costco from Hoban. In Region 7, Apollo Perkic from Berkshire. And in Region 8, Jordan Brockman from Baden. Now, I know Brockman and Hoying both had great seasons. It's pretty cool to see two setters as Player of the Year, actually. But Bobby Costco had an incredible season. I mean, historic. He's a middle hitter. He had 291 kills, hit 610. 610. I mean, that's ridiculous. And he led the state with 5.5 kills per set as a middle hitter. I mean, that's ridiculous. So I don't think there's any chance that he doesn't get Division 2 Player of the Year.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you. And that's one thing where the stats don't lie and the ball don't lie. Again, we've talked about Cam Hoying a lot and how his appearances on the court kind of decide how DeSales does overall. But again, I can't lie with what you say about Costco. 5.5 kills per set. I mean, you look at the guys who are nominated for D1 Player of the Year. You look at Meyer, you look at Zappone, Colin Brown, although he's a setter for Beaver Creek, and then of course Caden Whiteside. None of them are close to that stat marker. So again, kudos to Costco this year, because that's an extraordinary number for an extraordinary team this year in Hoban.
With that, that'll do it for this week of Ohio Volley Talk. Yeah, just heading into the playoffs and exciting. We got our final rankings coming out tomorrow, so should be a good one. Mahir, any final thoughts?
Not much, other than the fact that it's been a good regular season, a few more games, but starting on Monday, the playoffs are going to come, and it's going to be really interesting down the stretch. And as always, you can tune in to us on social media for ways to keep in touch, and more importantly, stay on track for what should be a really exciting playoff series to come.
From Ohio Volley Talk, this has been Mahir and I. We will catch you next week.